ABC Kinderteach presents Stone Soup as told by Marcia Brown. Stones are like rocks, so soup with rocks in them? That does not sound good to me at all. 3 soldiers trudged, which means they walked very tiredly, down a road in a strange country. They were on their way home from the wars. Besides being tired, they were hungry. In fact, they had eaten nothing for 2 days. So they're walking down this road. They're tired, they're hungry, and it looks like at the end of the road, it opens up. The trees kind of disappear. Maybe they'll find their stone soup, maybe.
"Oh, I would like a good dinner tonight," said the first.
"And a bed to sleep in,"
said the second.
"But all that is impossible," said the third. "We must march on."
On they marched. Suddenly, ahead of them, they saw the lights of a village.
"Maybe we'll find a bite to eat there," said the first.
"And a loft to sleep in,"
said the second.
"No harm in asking,"
said the third. And no harm in asking means that it would be good to ask. Now the peasants, or the poor farmers, of that place feared strangers. When they heard that 3 soldiers were coming down the road, they talked among themselves. And that is a loft, and so they're asking to be able to sleep in a place like that, just where they keep the hay. Nothing fancy at all. Here come 3 soldiers. Soldiers are always hungry, but we have little enough for ourselves. And they hurried to hide their food. They pushed sacks of barley under the hay in the lofts. They lowered buckets of milk down the wells. They spread old quilts, or old blankets that are patched up, over the carrot bins, and bins are like storage totes. They hid their cabbages and potatoes under the beds. They hung their meat in the cellars. They hid all they had to eat. Then they waited. And so that's what barley looks like kind of like seeds, kind of like grain, like bread of sorts. There's cabbage. And that's what a cellar looks like. It's like a basement, but not as fancy. The soldiers stopped first at the house of Paul and Francois. "Good evening to you," they said. "Could you spare a bit of food for 3 hungry soldiers?" "Oh, we have had no food for ourselves for 3 days," said Paul. Francois made a sad face. "It has been a poor harvest." The 3 soldiers went to the house of Albert and Louise. "Could you spare a bit of food, and have you some corner where we could sleep for the night?"
"Oh, no," said Albert. "We gave all we could spare to soldiers who came before you."
"Our beds are full," said Louise. So nobody seems to want to give them any food because they hid it all, and they don't want to give them any place to sleep either. At Vincent and Marie's, the answer was the same. It had been a poor harvest, which means they did not get a lot of food from what they planted, and all the grain or seeds must be kept for seed. So it went all through the village. Not a peasant had any food to give away. They all had good reasons. Of course, they're making it all up because they really do have food. They're just telling them that they don't have food. One family had used the grain for feeding the animals. Another had an old sick father to care for. All had too many mouths to fill. Too many people to feed. Now, they're telling them this to make them go away, to try to get them to go away. They really do have food. The villagers stood in the street and sighed like that. They looked as hungry as they could. The three soldiers talked together. They're talking to each other. I think they might be trying to come up with an idea for people to give them food, but the story's called Stone Soup, so has something to do with stone soup, doesn't it? Then the first soldier called out,
"Good people!"
The peasants drew near.
"We are three hungry soldiers in a strange land,"
which means it wasn't the place that they lived.
"We have asked you for food, and you have no food. Well, then we'll have to make stone soup."
So the soldiers are going to feed the people with stones soup, or like rock soup. Still does not sound very good to me. The peasants stared. Stone soup? That would be something to know about. So they're curious about what stone soup is.
"First we'll need a large iron pot,"
the soldiers said. The peasants, or the poor farmers, brought the largest pot they could find. How else to cook enough?
"That's none too large," said the soldiers,
"but it will do.
"And now, water to fill it and a fire to heat it."
So the soldiers are saying, "Oh, that's a big pot. It's going to be barely big enough, but I think we can try to make do with it." That's what they're saying when they say it's none too large. It took many buckets of water to fill the pot. A fire was built on the village square, and the pot was set to boil. So they have the fire, they have a pot, and they have water boiling in it. It must be time for the stones or the rocks. Still does not sound very good to me.
"And now, if you please, 3 round, smooth stones."
Well, let's see. There's one stone, there's another stone, and there's another stone. Ew, that still does not look good to me. Those were easy enough to find. The peasants' eyes grew round, which means they were like surprised, as they watched the soldiers drop the stones into the pot.
"Any soup needs salt and pepper," said the soldiers as they began to stir.
Children ran to fetch or to get salt and pepper.
"Stones like these generally," which means they most of the time they do, "make good soup. But oh, if there were carrots, it would be much better."
So they're getting salt and pepper in the soup with just rocks in it. And now they're saying if we could just have a little bit of carrots, or just a carrot or two, it would make it so much better.
"Why, I think I have a carrot or two,"
said Francois, and off she ran. So she ran to grab some of the carrots that she had hidden, right? She came back with her apron full of carrots from the bin beneath the red quilt. And there is an apron, and there's her apron right there, but there's a little boy with an apron on.
"A good stone soup should have cabbage,"
said the soldiers as they sliced the carrots into the pot.
"But no use asking for what you don't have."
"I think I could find a cabbage somewhere," said Marie, and she hurried home. Back she came with 3 cabbages from the cupboard under the bed. So they put carrots in there, and now they're saying, maybe some cabbage would be nice too.
"If we only had a bit of beef and a few potatoes, this soup would be good enough for a rich man's table."
So they're saying, okay, thanks for the carrots, thanks for the cabbage, but maybe just a little bit of meat and some potatoes would really make this taste great. The peasants thought that over. They remembered their potatoes and the sides of beef hanging in the cellars. They ran to fetch them.
A rich man's soup,
and all from a few stones. It seemed like magic. So really it's not stone soup, it's really just soup, but they are pretending it's stone soup because it has some rocks in it.
Ah, sighed the soldiers as they stirred in the beef and potatoes. If we only had a little barley and a cup of milk, the soup would be fit for the king himself. Indeed, he asked for just such a soup when last he dined or ate with us.
So they're saying that they had eaten the soup with the king. Now, that may or may not be true. We just don't know. The peasants looked at each other. The soldiers had entertained the king, which means they had visited with the king.
Well, but no use asking for what you don't have,
the soldiers sighed. The peasants brought their barley from the lofts. They brought their milk from the wells. The soldiers stirred the barley and milk into the steaming, which means it's very, very hot, broth, which is a watery soup, while the peasants stared. Boy, that soup has meat in it. It has potatoes. It has barley, which is kind of like rice, a little bit like rice, and some milk. It has lots of things in it besides just the stones or rocks, right? At last the soup was ready.
All of you shall taste, the soldiers said, but first a table must be set.
Great tables, which means very big, were placed in the square or the center of the little town, and all around were lighted torches. And that's what a lighted torch might look like. Such a soup, how good it smelled, truly fit for a king. But then the peasants asked themselves, would not such a soup require bread and a roast and cider? Soon a banquet or a big meal was spread and everyone sat down to eat. Never had there been such a feast or a big meal. Never had the peasants tasted such soup, and fancy, made from stones. They ate and drank and ate and drank, and after that they danced. They danced and sang into the night, so they are having a very good time. At last they were tired. Then the three soldiers asked, is there not a loft where we could sleep? Let three such wise and splendid, which means wonderful, gentlemen sleep in a loft? Indeed, they must have the best beds in the village. So they're saying, oh, we don't want you to sleep in the barn. We want you to sleep in the best beds that we have in our entire town. So the first soldier slept in the priest's house. The second soldier slept in the baker's house. And the third soldier slept in the mayor's house, or the person who's kind of like the boss of the town. In the morning, the whole village gathered in the square to give them a send-off, which means to tell them goodbye. Many thanks for what you have taught us, the peasants said to the soldiers. We shall never go hungry now that we know how to make soup from stones. Of course, it really wasn't the stones that made it good, right? It was the meat and the potatoes and the barley and the carrots and the cabbage. All that made it taste good, but they thought it was just the stones that made it taste good.
Oh, it's all in knowing how, said the soldiers, and off they went down the road. They must be going to their house. Such men don't grow on every bush.